Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this lecture organized by the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank in commemoration of its 40th anniversary. At this time, we'd like to invite Pastor Cecil Richards to the podium to do the prayer, the invocation, and we'd ask you to remain standing after the prayer for the playing of the national anthem. Please stand, everyone.
Good evening. Let us acknowledge the presence of God and let our hearts be in tune with God, our Creator and the Sovereign One. With your heads bowed, please, if you will. And so, Heavenly Father, we acknowledge you as God and Sovereign and approach your throne in our creatureliness, God, with all of our failures and with all of our aspirations, and yet we return to you, Father, because you are Omega, our source and our beginning, and Father, you are in charge of our destiny. So Father, we thank you that you are God over the nations and a God of blessing, and that you bless the hands and the effort of those who acknowledge you, who seek you, turn their face to you. Father, I pray therefore for this body, this organization, this meeting, that we will acknowledge you, that we will seek you, that we will turn our face towards you, God. And I pray that as we do so, that you will work through our institutions, you will work through our organization, you will work through our individual and corporate efforts, oh God, not only for our blessings individually, but upon our institutions and upon our countries and our peoples. We ask your blessing even on the ones that would present, that you will give inspiration, oh God, and direction to their presentations, and for our ability to receive and to put into practice, oh God, what was delivered unto us. Father, we pray that when you bless us, as we have asked for your blessing, that we will be careful to say, God has blessed us, and we will give testimony unto your great name through Jesus Christ. Amen. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, the national anthem of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Thank you very much. Please take your seats. Governor of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, Mr. Timothy N.J. Antoine, Prime Minister of St. Lucia, Philip J. Pear, other members of the Monetary Council, members of Parliament of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, members of Cabinet, distinguished guests, our panelists in Mrs. Atherley Kane, right, but you insisted on having the Kane, so Kane Solin, okay, Dr. Andrew Simmons, Aria Laidlaw Ferdinand, and Mr. Apollo Knights. Other invited guests, welcome to this evening's lecture. To get the formal proceedings going, we'd like to invite the country manager, Kozel, to do the opening remarks, brief remarks. Kozel Fraser, ladies and gentlemen.
members of the ECCB's Monetary Council, Governor of the ECCB, Mr. Timothy N.J. Antwine, Deputy Governor, Mrs. Dr. Valda Henry, Chief Director of Policy, Mrs. Tracy Polias. Other esteemed, our panelists, invited guests in the auditorium, and those joining us virtually, good evening. I really would like to welcome you to the ECCB's 40th anniversary lecture in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. This is the 6th lecture as we move across the region, not just in celebration of this milestone for the ECCB, but as we have deep, thought-provoking, heterodox conversations on the 21st century developmental challenges to our region. This evening, we have a monumental task of discussing education and training, skills for the 21st century with the focus on the yellow and green economies. I am extremely delighted to have this opportunity to invite such a vast audience, not just the brilliant minds that we have in this room, but the opportunity to engage grassroots members of society, persons who will have these very conversations in their living rooms and at the corners, but who ordinarily don't have the opportunity to feature at these platforms, to join in with us virtually. As how to put a child of the civil society movement, I have this stark awareness that discussion and conversations are very important. But inclusive conversations and dialogue is fundamental for not just endogenous development, but for sustainable development. It is my hope, even as we discuss this topic, that we could re-energize a movement through education and using education as a tool for education and skills to position St. Vincent and the Grenadines and the region to see the real economic growth, to help us to shift this region onto the trajectory it needs to be on. Our aspirations are achievable because we have come from a legacy of brilliant minds. We have come from a legacy of minds like Walter Rodney and Eric Williams, Morris Bishop, Marcus Garvey, Simon Bolivar, etc. And it was Haile Selassie who said that education has greatest value when it is established in individuals of good character with respect for God. I want to welcome our moderator back, Ms. Teresa Daniel. Her experience and work speaks for her love for her country. I also like to welcome to this session our A team, our distinguished panel. They all have names beginning with A. And I wish everyone a fantastic session and a wonderful lecture. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Country Manager Cozell Fraser. We are very fortunate to have live and direct this evening in our midst the Governor of the ECCB. This is lecture number 6, and I'm betting that this is probably the first one that you are at live. Am I betting correctly? So, yeah, a round of applause for that. We're special. Okay, it's my pleasure to welcome you, the Governor, to do the opening remarks.
Thank you, Master of Ceremonies. I will stand on the protocols, except to recognize, of course, the Prime Minister of St. Lucia, the Premier of Montserrat, the Premier of Anguilla, and the Minister for Education, Honorable Curtis King. I see Member of Parliament Bramble as well. And our panelists, thank you for helping us out tonight. Appreciate you, really looking forward. I'll be very brief because I want to hear what you have to say. We are celebrating, as you know, our 40th anniversary this year, and that's why we're having these lectures. So we've gone to every country. This is our 6th. I think we have Dominica in September, and then we culminate in November with what we call our global conference in St. Kitts, where the bank is headquartered. Our theme for our celebration is ECCB at 40, a year of reflection, celebration, and implementation. We have to reflect. I believe it was Socrates who said the unexamined life is not worth living. It's a time for us to reflect. It's also a time for us to celebrate. 40 years of financial monetary stability is no mean feat, and we ought to be proud of what we have achieved together as small states. But then we must move on with the implementation of our transformation agenda. And if anything, pick up steam and move even faster with implementing the things that are important for us. Hence the discussion about the big push. So this evening, our focus is on skills and training. We cannot do a big push without the requisite skills. And I have been long fortified in the view that notwithstanding the importance of remittances to this region, remittances cannot and will never be able to compensate for the critical loss of skills from this region through brain drain. Let's be clear. The bottlenecks we see in the public sector and the private sector today in our region are directly attributable, in many cases, to the lack of critical skills. So we must focus on skills. Here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, where the focus is on the three pillars of agriculture, construction, and tourism, skills are critical in this regard. When you find a good plumber, tell me, check me. I need a good plumber. Just to give an example, they are hard to find, the really good ones. So there's a lot for us to unpack, and it is just my duty this evening to welcome you all. Our Deputy Governor is somewhere around. Oh, she's right there. I was looking for you here. I want to recognize our Deputy Governor, who is the chair of our planning committee. And there's a subcommittee under the planning committee that is responsible for, in fact, these lectures that we've put together. They've been a hit across the currency union, and I suspect after the 40th we're going to have to find ways to do this from time to time. With that said, welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Governor Antoine. This panel discussion, as you heard earlier, is part of the ECCB lecture series organized in commemoration of the 40th anniversary of the bank's establishment. And I want to slip in here that I'm proud to be a part of the 40th anniversary, having been a proud member of staff of ECCB several years ago. The 40th anniversary celebrations have been designed to be reflective but propulsive as we advance policy design and implementation to support transformation of the respective economies within the currency union. This event here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines hopes to achieve critical reflection on the society and economy of SVG with a view to identifying key hurdles and elements of a meaningful path forward. The theme, Education and Training Skills for the 21st Century, the Yellow and Green Economy. It gives a sense of the level of formation and capacity development that is required to get St. Vincent and the Grenadines on a sustainable development path. To lead the discussion, we have, well, Cosell described them as the A-team. I didn't even realize that all of them had names starting with A. Our first panelist this evening is the daughter of two esteemed educators in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. As such, she often feels that her professional path was fated from birth. For almost 2 decades, Athalie Kane Sulin has been an English educator at the secondary level and is presently the Deputy Headmistress in Administrative Control at the St. Vincent Girls High School. Athalie Kane Sulin holds an undergraduate degree with honors in psychology with literatures in English from the University of the West Indies, a postgraduate certificate in education with merit, and a Master's of Arts degree with merit in education, both from the University of Nottingham. She also holds a postgraduate diploma in instructional design with distinction from the University of the West Indies Open Campus, and recently submitted her doctoral thesis in partial fulfillment of her doctoral degree in education from the same institution. Please welcome Athalie Kane Sulin.
Good evening, everyone. And thank you for that introduction, Ms. Danielle. And a heartfelt thank you to the ECCB for this meaningful opportunity to be a part of their 40th anniversary lecture series and to present on the topic, Education and Training, Skills for the 21st Century, Yellow and Green Economies. Given my background in education, I will be focusing on the role that education should play as it relates to the yellow and green economies. This evening, as not only the first presenter, but also as an educator, it is my duty to ensure that the audience has a common frame of reference on which we can expound. Therefore, I begin with the simplest of definitions for the yellow economy. The yellow economy refers to the use of science and technology to improve productivity and make it more lucrative. In color psychology, a field of psychology that studies hues, colors, and their association with human behavior and emotions, yellow is associated with creativity and innovation. So in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, where we have a heavy focus on agriculture, the use of drones to fertilize crops and to spray environmentally safe pesticides would be a practical exemplar of the yellow economy in action. Any application of science or technology to an industry that results in that optimization is the yellow economy. The green economy refers to promoting sustainability. Specifically, it highlights the well-being of human and natural resources. In color psychology again, green is associated with growth and abundance. So again, with our agricultural reference, the green economy focuses on sustainable agriculture, where society's food and textile needs are met without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. As such, the aim of all countries, especially small island developing states like ours, should be to balance the benefits of science and technology with the well-being of human beings and the environment. As with all things, there is a right way and a wrong way to do things. If technology is applied to the detriment of humanity and our natural resources, we have failed. Science and technology should enhance industry. It should not replace it. To this end, the role of education in achieving this aim is to equip learners with the knowledge, 21st century skills, values, and attitudes needed to optimize and sustain our economy. How can education do this? Education can do this by conveying the knowledge necessary to optimize and sustain our economy. To do so successfully, we first need to ensure that all stakeholders in education buy in to the aim. Without stakeholder buy-in, we will get nowhere. Students must be motivated. We have to show them the relevance and benefits of the green and yellow economies, as well as provide them with engaging and meaningful learning activities that allow them to explore, create, and collaborate. We must continue to integrate, and I want you to note the continue, because here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we are on the right track. Continue to integrate interdisciplinary knowledge and skills that enable learners to understand the complex interactions between human and natural systems, such as ecology, economics, ethics, politics, and culture. We have to provide opportunities for students to engage in learning that is project-based, service learning, and community-based. These allow them to apply their knowledge and skills to real-world problems and solutions. Teachers need to be equipped with the necessary resources and training to enable them to teach topics confidently and effectively, as well as to encourage them to share their experiences and best practices with their colleagues. The goal is for teachers to be able to support learners' personal and social development, well-being, and resilience, which will enable students to cope with the challenges and opportunities of the 21st century. Parents and guardians, as major influencers of their children's attitudes and behaviors, must be informed as to the goals and objectives of teaching about the yellow and green economies. And they must be involved in the learning process through ongoing communication, feedback, and participation. Education can equip learners with the 21st century skills needed to optimize and sustain our economy by developing students' critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, and communication skills, among the many other 21st century skills that empower them to become active citizens and agents of change in their local and global contexts. Education can foster the values and attitudes needed to optimize and sustain the yellow and green economies by encouraging learners' values, attitudes, and behaviors that reflect respect for diversity, empathy, compassion, responsibility towards themselves and others, and the planet. While we are on the right path in education, there are a few things more that should be done. There is a need for more financing for curriculum development in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The good intent, the ideas, and the qualified human resources are there, but financial resources are lacking. And this is the case in most small island states. We need to promote awareness of the yellow and green economies and encourage students to take the subjects that will better expose them to how they can optimize and sustain these economies. I spoke towards getting the buy-in of parents and guardians. Parents and guardians need to encourage their children, their wards, to take up the agriculture science along with the information technology. We need to encourage them to make use of the technical institutes. We need to encourage our children to grow their own food using the technology that they are natives to. And we need to reward innovation. When new ideas are presented, new ideas that facilitate growth in our yellow and green economies, we must reward these efforts. Our National Science Fair presents an invaluable opportunity to see the creativity of our young people. Beyond a trophy, a certificate, let us move towards large-scale implementation of the ideas that they have presented, the ideas that will foster growth in the yellow and green economies. We need to encourage our STEM workshops and summer programs. In summary, our takeaways are: the yellow economy, think science and technology. The green economy, think about yourself, your loved ones, the environment, your children. Balance is the key. Education should facilitate us finding this balance. And for education to work in this regard, we need the buy-in of all those involved. I thank you.
Thank you very much. AT member number 1, Atlee Kane Sulin. Our second presenter is Dr. Andrew Simmons, who is an environmental academic and activist, originally trained in education. He holds a Master's of Science degree in Community Economic Development, a Master's degree in Business Administration, postgraduate diploma in Human Research. Dr. Simmons earned his doctoral degree in the UK, and his PhD considered the impacts of climate change on young people and how communities can build resilience to mitigate its effects. Locally, he's known for launching the GEMS Progressive Community Organization in 1978. This environmental movement was formed after residents began to exploit the Kings Hill Forest Reserve in response to increasing unemployment in the communities in the southeast of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. He has worked with the United Nations Development Program and on numerous development initiatives encouraging young people around the world to be more environmentally conscious. He worked as head of mission in Sierra Leone, West Africa, implementing the Youth Employment and Entrepreneurship Project. He has been awarded numerous environmental prizes, including the Goldman Environmental Prize in 1994. He's also the author of 3 academic books on climate change published by Springer Publishers, who happen to be the largest global publishers of academic books and journals. Please welcome Dr. Andrew Simmons.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for such eloquent description. Let me take the opportunity to welcome a colleague of mine from Wake Forest University in the USA. They would be here, well, they're here to work with the GEMS Progressive Community Organization on a very interesting research project on risk mapping on the southeast of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And I think that they would be in Union Island to do work with the environmental group in that community. I chose to take the terms of my presentation the simplest option. No PowerPoint. All I did, I prepare a paper, because I have the tendency when I'm speaking, once I get excited, something to go off on certain tangents. So I try and keep my script, because I know Madam Chair is really checking our time. So let me go straight into the presentation. My presentation will draw heavily from research conducted for my PhD studies with a centralized focus on the impact of climate change on young people in small island developing communities. The research focused on the issues relating to the relevance of education and training provided by TVET and tertiary institutions in St. Vincent, considering the increases in the severity of the impacts of climate change phenomena, of which a conceptual framework emerged entitled Climate Change Adaptation for Youth in Small Island Developing States. And this is the reduction, the book that came out from my thesis. The second body of work I will draw on led to my book, Climate Change Adaptation Framework and Youth Entrepreneurship in West Africa. This body of work focused on the implementation of the Climate Change Adaptation Framework for youth in SIDS in the least developing country, Sierra Leone, through the Youth Employment and Entrepreneurship Program, which was funded by the African Development Bank and the government of Sierra Leone. And saying that way, that this is an activity of the ECCB, I would try to draw some parallel in terms of, so this is the second book. The third, I would also like to draw on the third body of work from my academic book, Building Institutional Resilience, Combating Climate Change. This book utilizes a case study approach to present data on the relevance and effectiveness of strategic actions implemented over the past 45 years, drawing on lessons and recommendations to enhance the capacity of government and civil society institutions to deliver climate change adaptation and mitigation and sustainable development initiatives across the globe. So this is the third book, which encompasses 45 years of work. Education, skills, and economic development. One of the objectives of education is to contribute to economic growth and sustainability. For education to be effective and responsive to the development needs of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, it must be high in quality and meets the knowledge and skills demands by the economy and society. Therefore, continuous education and training must be implemented to fulfill the above objectives. Training young people to meet the current needs is no longer necessary, but to develop skills and knowledge that support entrepreneurship, resilience, new technologies, innovations in enterprise development, and their transition to sustainable development practices. It is also necessary to train the entire workforce continuously. This strategic approach calls for a human capital approach to education and skill development. Government and training providers must ensure access to training programs that supports lifelong skills development and focus on future market needs. Climate change will bring about serious changes to existing enterprises and economic sectors across the globe. Therefore, building the adapted capacity of persons and their communities to the impact of climate change will be essential to protect enterprises, workplaces, and communities from the negative impacts of climate change. The fundamental question I wish to ask are, what is climate change? How does it negatively impact the life of young people and their communities in St. Vincent and the Grenadines? And what innovative strategies need to be implemented to ensure that education and skills development models to be adopted are relevant to the country's development need? A study by the World Bank in 2015 on the quality of education and training in small island development states in the Caribbean states that despite learners spending 11 years in education system, school leavers within SIDS often struggle to find employment. Richard Carter in 2008 posits a mismatch between the skills and knowledge provided by the educational institutions in small island developing states and those required by the market or the workplace. This view is supported by a study from the United Nations Development Program in 2015, which states that the challenges in skills mismatch in the knowledge economy in the Caribbean are due to the slow rate of technological innovations taking place in developing countries, compounded by the rapid growth in demand for new and higher skills that are not forthcoming in most developing countries in the Caribbean. In response to these questions, I wish to start from the premise that education should be viewed as an economic good because it is not easily obtained and thus needs to be appropriated and allocated for. Fundamentally, despite the investments in education and training provided in small island states in the Caribbean, St. Vincent and the Grenadines system does not equip young people to meet the current development needs of the region, thus not preparing them to meet their future needs. And for me, that's a serious fundamental issue. The key to fulfill this gap is to ensure strong interaction between the wall of work, that is the market, and the wall of education and training. Young people need to acquire adequate skills and knowledge that will equip them to participate in initiatives relating to the greening of the economy and enhance their resilience to the impact of climate change. Due to the huge potential for the economic growth and sustainable livelihoods derived from the blue economy, shift a bit to the blue economy, education and skills training provide relevant knowledge and competencies for persons to exploit, to preserve, and regenerate the marine environment. Therefore, the focus should be on sustainable use of ocean resources for economic growth to improve livelihoods and jobs while preserving the health of the ocean's ecosystem. Education and skills development must also focus on preparing persons to develop and exploit the green economy. That is, concentrate on sectors of energy, transportation, agriculture, and forestry. What are the issues relating to education and training in St. Vincent and in small island developing states? One, several professions currently provided by education and training institutions as course will not be required in the next 10 to 20 years. If they are still required in the future, the format and skill sets required will drastically change. And this is something that we really need to bear in mind. The effectiveness and relevance of education policies, but an important part of the education system is to ensure young people can access education and training to transit to new jobs. Therefore, it is important to note that effective education cannot be achieved through implementing one-of-a-kind or one-off training activities as is practice. That's a no-no. Alignment is necessary between skills development, education and training, and skills required to effectively run the economy and society. That is, education and training institutions need to provide the relevant skills necessary to run the society now and into the future effectively. The absence of climate change adaptation for sustainable development strategies and education policies and curriculum. This is an initiative by the UNICEF. There's a piecemeal approach regarding developing the economy currently practiced in St. Vincent. The approach requires a complete overhaul. In its place, developing a new innovative climate change adaptation for sustainable development curriculum will ensure that the skills and the training provided are relevant to the development needs and market of St. Vincent and the Grenadines and the wider Caribbean. In Sierra Leone, and I'm just pulling a bit from the African example, this assessment, development, and approval work on the curriculum was implemented in collaboration with the National Council for Technical and Vocational Awards, the Ministry of Higher Education, the private sector, and other stakeholders. It was a partnership approach. There's need to be a reassessment of the methodologies utilized by training institutions to train people in TVET and skills development programs at secondary and tertiary level. The methods adopted must be participatory and innovative, which engage trainees in education and training process. The use of innovative technologies should form the basis of the education and skills development process. The focus should be on utilization of new and relevant tools and technologies that are used in the workplace to train learners in the modern classroom. And I use the word modern classroom. Entrepreneurship, training, and development should and must form the basis of all training and development in this area. Young people should be trained to create employment opportunities rather than depending on government and private sectors for a job. Such training should focus on working with learners to establish their businesses, including preparing business plans and proposals, and manage and pitch projects to mobilize funding to implement and expand their business. The development of internship and apprenticeship systems must, with relevant businesses in public, private, and voluntary sector, provides opportunities for trainees to gain experience and refine their skills and knowledge in their study area and their workplace. I think we need to go back to what this used to be a big thing in St. Vincent. I remember when I was 15 years, my mother said, look, you need to go and work with a carpenter, because I want you to be a carpenter, but I mean, life went the other way. The provision of seed funds, loans, and grants to trainees to support the development and implementation of business concepts, projects, can be done through the establishment of the Grameen Bank and or the Commonwealth Youth Credit Initiative group lending mechanism models. So there are 2 established models. I work on them, I studied them, I implement it across the Commonwealth in 53 countries across the Commonwealth. And so we have persons in the Caribbean who are well skilled and versed in terms of implementing these models. Government and development organizations should provide the capacity development resources to mobilize local and external resources to enhance the capacity of the private sector, education and training institutions, and civil society organizations to develop and implement relevant education and training initiatives to respond to such needs. And I heard the local bank manager, who is a local manager who is a product of the civil society. She mentioned that to some extent, and I think one of the, and I'm throwing this out to you, Governor Antoine, because one of the sad things in development work in the Caribbean, there's a tendency for us, or for banks, to just provide support to governments rather than supporting the work of civil society. And I know a number of persons here came from the civil society background. And so that is an area of serious that we need to consider, because a number of the development, education, and training programs that are in St. Vincent and across the OECS are run by civil society organizations. So this is something that we need to look at very seriously. 12? The reason why I said 12, I told the chair that when I get to 12, when you get to 12 minutes, just let me know. Because due to the limited resources available to implement changes in education and skills in St. Vincent, it is necessary to implement a sub-regional approach through the OECS or through CARICOM. And I know the OECS mission is quite very good when it comes to that. But, and this was something that was adapted by the African Development Bank. And this institution pilots specific strategic models in education and skills in member countries by extracting innovations, the lessons learned, and best practices, and replicate these models across the region. So this is something that the OECS, I know you're doing some of this, but I would really love to see a bit more of that. And in concluding, a major shift in education and skills development is required to transit learners to achieve sustainable livelihoods and lifelong learning. This strategic shift in education will provide them with the skills and knowledge necessary to develop the country now and into the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Simmons. See, you stood well within your time allotted. Our third panelist is Miss Aria Laidlow Ferdinand. She is currently a local disaster and climate risk management consultant and a lecturer in green engineering at the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Community College Division of Arts, Sciences, and General Studies. She has worked and researched in the fields of climate and disaster risk financing, disaster preparedness and response, and environmental management for over 5 years. She has an MSc in environmental change and management from the University of Oxford and a bachelor's with majors in environmental, natural resource management, and geography from the UWI. She has also been involved in various local and regional initiatives and organizations. She currently sits on the Caribbean Movement-led Approach Advisory Committee for Feminist Activism and Climate Justice. She's a member of the Jeff SGP UNDP National Steering Committee for St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Please help me welcome Aria Laidlow Ferdinand.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for such warm introductory remarks. I almost thought she was talking about someone else. It is indeed a pleasure to have been given the opportunity to be a part of such a distinguished panel tonight and to speak about something that is dear to my heart: green skills for the future, a pathway to inclusive, sustainable, and a resilient economy for St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Disclaimer: I often don't subscribe to some of the labels and buzzwords when we are within the realm of environmental management. Next slide, please. I often believe that they are quite arbitrary, to be quite frank, and within our context within the region, they often don't provide the strategic guidelines and pathways that we need to be able to bring about impact and build the resilience of our people. Next slide. Nevertheless, we need to understand what the goal is about, what the journey is about. And we have the green economy. And when you do a Google search, you often come across photos like this: green space, signs of renewable technology, often solar and wind, and indication of a net zero atmosphere. Green, clean air. And this is great. It focuses on the science, the technology, and the innovation that is needed. Next slide, please. So when we look at the general definition of the green economy, it focuses on the potential of low carbon infrastructure, renewable energy, climate mitigation and adaptation, and eco-products to re-stimulate flagging economies. And this is so important, and it serves a purpose, the green economy concept. It calls for a global coalition to catalyze a movement towards a newer type of economy, indicating that business as usual is not the way to go. It's not the way to go if we want our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren to enjoy the benefits from the resources that we are receiving right now. Next slide, please. So when we see pictures like this from the Caribbean context, we need to understand that if we're serious about resilience and sustainable development, we have to first acknowledge that we live in a multi-hazard risk environment, so we need to consider aspects as it relates to disaster risk reduction. And we need to also understand that with best practices, we have to tailor it to be able to ensure that it is best fit and best suited within our context. Next slide, please. We also have to be cognizant of the fact that our inherent characteristics as small island developing states and our colonial past erodes our ability to be able to transition towards the green economy. And I'll just give you a local example here within our Vincentian context. The COVID-19 pandemic, the Lassa eruptions, and Hurricane Elsa resulted in 50 million EC dollars of current deficit, an increase of 13% total public debt over the last reporting year. And this is the reality of which we live in. But hope is not lost. Next slide, please. The Caribbean Natural Resource Institute defines the green economy within the Caribbean context. And if you look at the components of that definition, it highlights aspects of being economically viable, being pro-poor, understanding that in order for us to transition towards the green economy and drive that, we have to leverage human, physical, and our natural capital. Next slide, please. So it is no surprise that harnessing green skills is essential for driving the green economy. And this is a lovely photo of my students doing a water quality testing exercise with National Parks, Rivers and Beaches Authority. And when we define green skills, we're looking at the knowledge, the abilities, the attitudes, and the values to be able to reduce the negative environmental impacts. Next slide, please. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a few sectors that are key to the economy of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And we're going to look at some of the skills that we can continue to build on and develop over time. Note that I have not exhausted these here. You know, we only have 15 minutes. But within the agricultural context, we need to be looking at building skills pertaining to organic farming, permaculture, which is a type of agricultural practice that mimics the natural ecosystem. And we have a perfect example here at the Richmond Vale Academy on the leeward end of the country. We need to look at the entire value chain of the agricultural industry, even the distribution and packaging. So when we consider packaging our produce, we don't only look at what looks good, but we also have to consider material selection. Try to look for avenues in which we can make connections to reuse material, to select materials that would have the least negative environmental impact. Next slide, please. The energy sector. One of the key sectors that is needed in order for us to transition towards a greener, sustainable economy. So when we're looking at this particular sector, we have to look at building skills within the renewable energy sources and the ones which we can take the most advantage of. It is important to note. We need to also look at building knowledge as it pertains to installation, maintenance, optimization of renewable energy sources. And I have not included here, but understanding the grid system and eventually being able to create smart grids so that we'll be able to be more efficient and harness the best from our renewable energy sources. Next slide, please. And of course, construction, green buildings and sustainable architecture. It's important that our architects are able to design buildings, look at the life cycle. So from the time the material extracts from the ground to build that building until after commercial life, be able to look at all the phases and find windows of opportunities to be able to green that particular infrastructure. Using passive designs, taking advantage of natural lighting, natural cooling, and ventilation. These are the things and skill sets that we need to build within this sector. Next, please. And as a lady from the Grenadines, a Grenadines woman, tourism, of course, right? So normally when we look at greening the tourism, we often run to ecotourism. But let us go even further than that, looking at creating niche sustainable tourism markets, looking within the accommodation sector and within our structures and see where we can create energy efficiency and renewable energy opportunities. In addition to that, let us look for windows of opportunity to create linkages with other industries such as agriculture. Instead of creating waste, how we can use some of those produce to create pickles and jams that can be sold and served in our hotels and the different establishments across St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Next, please. So in driving these green skills, the educational and training technical vocational institutions are key. And there are things happening. And I just want to highlight in my particular context as a green engineering lecturer at the SVGCC. And it is so amazing because this is a new course, but it bridges perfectly the skill set that the students would need within the green and yellow economy. When we consider green engineering, we're looking at how science, technology, and innovation are underpinned by environmentally conscious values to create solutions to our gravest environmental problems. Next slide, please. And I just want to highlight some work that my students here, 2 SBA students, did. So this was an SBA where the group redesigned the Kingstown vegetable market. And I've put some photos of the different spaces and floors within the market. As you can see there, they created a green roof using natural vegetation and also hard technology with solar panels, designing a space that takes advantage of natural lighting and ventilation. And in the corner there, you can even see incorporation of water harvesting techniques and creating a multi-purpose space where individuals, it becomes a shading area and a nice seating area for individuals to enjoy. Next slide, please. Students are also looking at how we can green the transportation sector, taking Little Tokyo as their case study and redesigning it, creating a space that is multi-purpose in use and finding opportunities where they can incorporate renewable energy and also create linkages to nearby industries, considering that the fish market is right next to Little Tokyo and how they could create systemic linkages between that. Next slide, please. So when it comes to skill sets, the value of that is always linked to employability. And this is a study, a report that was done by LinkedIn. And a plug, I encourage all young professionals to create a LinkedIn page and be active. And it shows that green skills, the demand for green skills are outpacing the supply. And if this is the direction, understanding that we live within a global village, if this is the direction that the world is going, we need to ensure that we are equipped and we are ready, especially since we are on the eve of the 4th industrial revolution. An industrial revolution that considers artificial intelligence, STEM, and big data to be the center of our driving our economies. Next, please. So what do we do? What are the steps that we need to take? Because even though things are happening, we need to be intentional. And we need to start building the foundations and mapping the system. So this was a report done by our brothers and sisters in Barbados, looking at skills for green jobs, highlighting where they are going to go and what is needed to ensure that they get to their destination of what they consider as a Bajan green economy. We also have similar scoping studies in St. Lucia. And I do believe this is where St. Vincent and the Grenadines, this is where we have to start. It's not just what's going on within the educational institutions. We need to identify what are the relevant policy and framework mechanisms that need to be in play, the institutional capacities that need to be built, the other stakeholders, international and regional linkages that we need to make. We need to map it out so that we can ensure that we have a roadmap to the St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the green economy, the Vincentian green economy that we would like to see in the future. Next slide, please. The big picture. And let's bring things to a full circle. I started out with a big disclaimer that I really don't subscribe to labels. Because as I sit here, understanding what green skills are, they can be developed in every single profession in this room today. When we tagline and when we use labels, we often get stuck in boxes. So we consider green skills to be allocated to those who are within the field of conservation, those who are within the field of agriculture. But the truth and fact is, persons who are within the field of IT can develop green skills. And isn't that is what we need to mainstream climate change, to mainstream disaster risk reduction, building those mindsets. But we need to do the foundational work. And to me, green skills should be all skills for all professions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Much food for thought there. I'd like to acknowledge the presence of the Honorable Minister of Finance and incoming Chair of the Monetary Council, Mr. Camilo Gonzalez. Welcome. Good evening. Last but by no means least is panelist number 4. He is the director of the National Telecommunications Regulatory Commission, the NTRC, and has been in that position since 2002. Apollo Knights is a highly driven and innovative thinker with over 20 years of experience within the ICT sector. He has spent the last 2 decades working in the public sector in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and specifically around telecommunications development, regulation, and policy. Prior to joining the NTRC as its director in 2002, he was a telecommunications officer in the Ministry of Communications and Works and was deeply involved in the freeing up of telecommunications within the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, OECS. His expertise covers a wide range of areas including management, emergency communications, numbering, universal service and access, policy development, digital transformation, and the internet. He believes in practical solutions to challenges and has operated within a personal vision of seeing our citizens locally as well as in our sub-region being connected consistently to the digital economy, no matter race, gender, or income level. He holds a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering, a master's degree in telecommunications and networking, and an MBA in international business. Mr. Apollo Knights.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to say good evening to everyone here, as well as those online. Some online might be good afternoon and good morning, based on the time zones we're in, and the power of technology to get this to wherever you are in the world. Being the last speaker, I don't know if it's good or bad, but we'll find out if I am able to add a little value after following these lovely presentations there. All right, so let's get started. Go back one slide, I think. Go back. Right, so I'm going to cover 4 points tonight. The first one, the context of my presentation. The second one is the relationship of education and skills with that of business and by default economy. I'll try and bring that connection there. Number 3, the missing piece of the puzzle. I'm going to bring some missing pieces there. I call it X and Y factors. Right, so I've been asked to speak on the theme of this evening's event from the perspective of innovation and competitiveness. So let's all get on the same page. I'm going to use the meaning of innovation from the Oxford Dictionary, so bringing in new methods, ideas, etc., making changes. And competitiveness, they're going to use that from the Oxford languages, from this on the internet, where this is the ability of a business to deliver better value to customers than competitors. I would like to use the definition of competitiveness in this context, even though I'll also be speaking about competitiveness of individuals, not just businesses. I'll be looking at the theme from the angle of how education and training skills can allow for innovation and competitiveness both at a personal and business level, with a specific twist that such education and training on their own are not sufficient to be innovative and competitive and thereby successful. There are other 2 pieces that I will touch on, is the X and Y factors that will come later. I believe the main reason most people pursue educational and skills development is to be able to offer a service or good that someone else values and is willing to offer financial remuneration, that is, say, money, for that service or good. And the movement of this money or its amassment is what we call economy. So in a nutshell, all that I will be talking about this evening relates in some way to the economy, money, and people. Unless you live by yourself, saying last to free, and go and produce all that you need, you will relate to these areas almost daily. You will meet other people, you will either spend incur expenses or receive money each day. In short, you play a part in the economy, be it local, regional, or international. Accordingly, there will be no need for education and skills development if businesses did not exist. So business is a critical aspect of my presentation. And I believe all of us will concur that business play a major role in a thriving economy. Definitely, Governor will agree with that. So every one of us is in business and should act like a business professional. This leads to my second point of the presentation, the relationship of education and skills, training with that of business and the overall economy. Education and skills alone will provide knowledge. Knowledge does not equate on its own with what I will term sustainable success or drives innovation and competitiveness. Getting knowledge is only acquiring what other people already know. To get value from that, you need to add value to that knowledge for which someone will be willing to pay you instead of paying someone else to possess the same knowledge. That's what competitiveness is all about and what one will call a competitive advantage. However, it seems that our schools in the Caribbean and many other developing countries, so not just in the Caribbean alone, are mainly targeting the development of knowledge and skills. And we wonder why our countries are not developing or succeeding as much as we would like to. This brings me to the X factor, which is wisdom. Surprise some people, it is X factor. Wisdom and knowledge are not the same thing, even though a lot of people use them interchangeably at times. The definition of knowledge, according to the Oxford Dictionary, is a theoretical or practical understanding of a subject, language, etc. Well, wisdom is defined by the said dictionary as experience and knowledge together with the power of applying them critically or practically. In short, one can say wisdom is the proper application of knowledge/experience. As we clearly see from the definition of wisdom, it also requires a power. This, ladies and gentlemen, leads us to the third factor, the Y factor. These three pieces are what is required for sustainable success, the X, Y, and the knowledge, the skills that we covered earlier on. And allows for innovation that feeds competitiveness as an individual and as a business on a whole. This Y factor is what we need to focus more on, both at the local and regional level. And we'll come back to the Y factor shortly. I will now spend some time on the first piece of the puzzle, that of digital skills. Next slide, please. Right, so you guys can look at all those things while I continue. So under the current Caribbean Digital Transformation Project, which the ECCB under the governor was very involved in getting started and very important, being executed by our governments in the OECS sub-region via World Bank funding, the consultants have just completed a market assessment and recommendations on the key digital skills and soft skills currently in demand in the information technology enabled services sector in the OECS. And I hope my minister doesn't get upset that I'm revealing these things so quickly just from the April report. But I think he thinks it's good. So I'll mention some of these which are important, very important, as they are part of the puzzle, but not complete the puzzle. From the assessment, most respondents were looking for technical skills related to digital marketing, programming, and cybersecurity skills, among others, as you see on the screen. However, the most important soft skill mentioned was communication, more specifically, the ability to bridge the communication gap between programming and business to be able to convey business needs to programmers. And these skills are, as you see on the current slide. The market assessment also lists the priority occupations needed in St. Vincent and Grenadines, along with the sectors that need these as seen in the next slide. Right, so you see the priority ones there. We look at those while I continue. So I agree with all above skills here. They're all good. But as you know, technology doesn't wait. As a few others that I think persons can start exploring are the following. One, artificial intelligence in many forms, ChatGPT, etc., good stuff to learn. Second one, Internet of Things, something not being given much attention as the artificial intelligence, but one that will be bringing a lot of changes to our economies in the very near future, Internet of Things. And thirdly, 5G and 6G, wireless standards, solutions. We need to study these standards being developed. We don't have to wait till they're released on the phone. They've been developed, and we can study these to know what's coming. That's why the guys are to innovate. So you look at these stuff and see what's coming. So these give us some idea of what is currently in demand and where prospective students could explore given their passions and gifts. It's also very applicable to existing individuals who may need to look for new skills, such as myself, as their current skills become redundant due to technological developments. The World Economic Forum predicts that 60% of existing workers, including myself, will need retraining by 2027, 4 years' time. So as individuals and business leaders, we have the responsibility to equip and re-equip ourselves and our employees with critical skills needed if we have to continue to compete in this evolving economy. Learning must be a continuous thing we do, just like how we feed ourselves food each day. We must learn new things on a continuous basis in this 21st century. As I was working on this presentation, pieces on pieces, and one of my bricks, I went to obtain more knowledge. So I went to my friend's statuses on WhatsApp to see what's happening there. And I saw this post, and I think it puts everything into perspective. So next slide. All right. It's a quote from Alvin Toffler. The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, which is the normal way we look at being illiterate. Will not be those who can read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. So I think we need to look at that a little bit. I'm a firm believer in blending formal educational programs with certified cutting-edge short courses, say 1 to 6 months, such as what you'll find on online learning platforms like Coursera. Coursera just published a global skills report for 2023, which pulls data from 124 million registered learner base. That is among the persons using Coursera. I'm one of those 124 million. Just to see. I will list the 7 key. Next slide. I will list the 7 key findings from my executive summary. I won't go through all of them, but they're there. You can always come back on YouTube. I just touched on the last 2, 6 and 7 in the red. Learners around the world are preparing for digital roles with professional certificates. So not just the UB degrees or the Oxford or whichever ones, they're all good, but you need to do these professional certificates, which are cutting edge, you get them fast. So learners around the world are using this stuff constantly. And 7, skilled talent can be found around the world, including St. Vincent and Grenadines and the OECS, and which we saw this morning, C.W. Prescott, and I think it was Hannah, her name is, with the song from St. Joseph's Convent. Real good, real talent that can make money. Yeah. So now the missing piece of the puzzle. Don't change the slide, leave it there. Don't go back. Well, yeah. All right, go to the next one. Go to the puzzle. Right, leave it right there for me, please. Right. So now let's spend a little time on the Y factor and the one until we address it personally, level, national and a regional level, we will not innovate and compete as we should to enable us to create a Caribbean civilization and economy that is resilient, inclusive, and sustainable. It relates to soft skills. And my friend touched a little on it there. It provides the nice attributes we see in the core and culture values of businesses. For example, integrity, honesty, accountability, innovative, service-minded, ambition, trust, growth mindset, long-term thinking, these stuff here. But it's not seen as a substantive subject taught in our schools. Don't sit in there really. For my research, the closest subject that covers the area is social studies, which I never did, which is normally an optional subject in our secondary school's curriculum. We have maths, English, and sometimes a foreign language as mandatory stuff, mandatory requirements. We must add soft skills, Minister King Day, please, to this mandatory mix. These attributes, along with the hard skills, contribute heavily to wise decisions and building of sustainable businesses that can compete and innovate. Certainly, they are hard to measure, and they will not be found in your audited financial statements, but can be sensed by your peers and your customers. So how are these attributes developed, and why are they hard to measure via tests, etc.? The reason for this is that they are spiritual in nature. My friend Pastor Richards will like those. Some people are born with them, gifted with them, and others can develop them over time. I'm trying to develop my own over time. So back to the definition of wisdom that represents the power needed to make the right decisions. So back to the power there. This power is also of a spiritual nature. These core values that we look for in the employees are spiritual. Every business which intends to be successful needs employees with these core values. Some of you right now might be thinking, I don't agree with what you're saying, Apollo. I don't agree with what you're saying. Show me some proof, some evidence. So let's try this for some food of thought. Jews make up roughly 2.3% of the US population, which means all things being equal, numbers there, they should have around 8 to 9 persons on the Forbes 400 list each year, if that is everything being equal. However, depending on the year you do as a sample, they have between 60 to 100 people on that list, or to the 400, Jews. I think that's sufficient evidence. It is clear that the Jews are punching above their weight in business. And it can be a result of them having more hard skill than others. Go back. No, not yet. Come in. Well, leave it there. It's almost there. Leave it there. Go to it. Yeah, we're almost there. You're on target. Yeah. Schools of all types are widely accessible by many. So it can't be the hard skills, especially in the USA. You can go to school and learn the hard skills. So that can't be the reason. The success of the Jews in business lies in the soft skills that they have learned and practiced over the last 3,000 years, and which are passed down to generation after generation, but which can be learned by anyone, no matter their religious background. So we can learn them too. There are around 40 business secrets in the Bible that are used by Jews, 40. In the interest of time, I'll just list 7 of these, which is 7 over there. You can go through them. I'm not going to go through them, but those who are interested can go through them. They'll be on YouTube, we can look back on it later. So here's why we need to put some effort as a country and a region if we want to have better businesses, as individuals and companies. We must see how we can better incorporate the development of these soft skills and spiritual principles in our school system, from kindergarten right up to university, so that our students as individuals will be better businesses, students and myself. Next slide. Right, so now this is the last part here. Hope you're good on time. Hopefully bear me. The result of the above mix, the 3 pieces, the knowledge, the wisdom, and the soft skills, coming to bring it together now. So the 3 pieces of this puzzle are knowledge, wisdom, and soft skills, which will lead to sustainable success. I use the word sustainable. Some people get short-term success, doing not so good things. If you want to last long term, this is what you need. Wisdom will guide you to make the right decisions at the right times using the skills and spiritual principles that are within you. You'll produce continuous value to your customers who are willing to exchange their money for the goods or services that you're offering. Whether you are a business of one person who's employed by an organization, or you manage a traditional form of business offering goods or services to many customers. People might be asking, how do I get wisdom or get more of it? Well, it's not found in traditional schools. It wasn't mentioned in the digital skills report by the council.